Well, we're at that season again. It's Christmas. And Christmas is my favorite season. It's my favorite time of the year. But with this season, there can be tons of stress, chaos, all the bills, events, parties, even fighting within the family. Now, if you've been around for a few decades, you know how this can go. So on today's episode, I'm going to share a new perspective, a different way to think about how it is that you could lead your family through this season. So let's get started. So as of today, when I'm recording this, we've got about 2 weeks to go until Christmas. Christmas is a time of peace and love, happiness, and celebration of Jesus. At least that's what we often want it to be. Instead, it can all too often be a time of argument, chaos, stress, depression, and families fighting. Now, you might be feeling this already. It could be that there's not enough in the bank account to celebrate the way that you want, or buy the gifts that you want to give others. Or it could be that there are trips that you can't afford to take. Or it could be family members that you know are going to start fighting with you about politics or sports or the weather or anything else. It could be the extra stress of not meeting all those unspoken expectations that everybody seems to have. It's not hard to get overwhelmed by this season. It's easy to get wrapped up in the noise, the chaos, and the busyness. So the idea of leading your family, sometimes it's the last thing from your mind. You're just trying to get through. And you might rather just send everyone away, sit in silence, and watch some Christmas movies. You might rather not participate in any of it at all. But that's not a good solution. And we can get so easily swept up in the commotion that we don't end up stepping back and remembering what Christmas is about in the first place. We can quickly end up in a storm of shopping, wrapping, traveling, baking, rushing from one place to the next, barely catching your breath before it's January. And you look in the mirror and you wonder, what just happened? Now, if you're there, if you're feeling that, just pause right now. Take a breath for a minute. It's time to lead in a different direction. If that's you, and even if it's not, I'm sure you can understand that. Here's what I want you to do instead. I want you to stop and think about your ideal Christmas. What's that look like? I want you to think about how you can truly honor and celebrate Jesus through this season. Think about what needs to be different from last year in order to make this year about Him first. So what does that look like for you? What are your conversations like? What are your gifts like? What are your parties like? What happens differently in the truck driving to and from places? Spend some real time thinking about this. Don't just repeat last year on autopilot, going into debt, getting stressed out, just waiting for it to be over. You think instead, what is an ideal Christmas that gives God the glory, that honors Jesus? What does that look like for you, for your family? Now, if you've never thought of it this way, you'll have to be ready to adjust your thinking. This could be a very different way of going into this season. And then once you start to get an idea of what this is, what that looks like, you need to sit down and talk with your spouse about how to make it happen. Things are going to have to change, and people are hesitant to change. Even with situations where you didn't like how things turned out, people are still hesitant to change. So keep that in mind as you start down this path. So what will have to change for you? The places and the times that you travel. Maybe you can't get to as many places. Maybe you can't get to them on those times. The amount of money that you spend on gifts. Maybe it's time to pull back some of that. Simpler is quite often better. Time together is quite often better than something that's opened and then forgotten in the garbage shortly thereafter. Maybe you have to change the expectations that you've placed on other people. Maybe you need to change the conversations that you choose to participate in. Do you choose to talk about Jesus at the parties instead? There's a lot that might need to change. As you lead your family, do it from the perspective of the ideal Christmas that gives God the glory. Because it's so easy to get swept up into the season and lose sight on why we have this in the first place. It's not the parties. It's not the decorations. It's not the gifts. We celebrate Christmas to honor Jesus. It was His birth, His sacrifice, His death on the cross, and His resurrection that changed the world. No matter how big or little your Christmas celebration is, if you keep him at the center, you remember why he was born in the first place. You remember from that perspective, you create your ideal Christmas around that. If you do that, you're leading your family well. Please be sure to subscribe to this show wherever you listen to your podcasts or if you watch it on YouTube. Your ratings, your reviews, your subscriptions, shares, comments, all that stuff, it really helps other people find the show. So thank you for that. All right, enjoy the next show.